South Korean companies, rather than the Japanese firms responsible, will pay Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. Seoul's unprecedented proposal aims to heal ties with Tokyo, but not everyone's happy about the decision. A warning coming from Pyongyang this morning following the latest military drills by Seoul and Washington. Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader, says the regime is ready to take overwhelming actions against the joint exercises. A plan to reform the current 52-hour workweek system has been proposed to allow more flexibility and a better work-life balance. We begin with an unprecedented announcement made by the country yesterday. South Korean companies, rather than the Japanese firms responsible, will compensate the Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. A proposal widely welcomed by world leaders, but not everyone's in the same boat. Our Paeun-ji starts us off.
In 2018, South Korea's Supreme Court made landmark rulings ordering two Japanese companies, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel, to compensate 15 Korean victims of forced labor during World War II. Foreign Minister Park Jin announced Monday that the South Korean government will compensate these victims using funds procured through a public foundation, called the Foundation for Victims of Forced Mobilization by Imperial Japan. The foundation will pay the compensation and interest on the delayed payment to the plaintiffs of the final rulings made in 2018, and it will also cover the compensation and interest for the plaintiffs of pending cases, if the court rules in their favor. Instead of the accused Japanese firms, Korean businesses that were beneficiaries of the 1965 treaty that normalized bilateral ties, including POSCO, will be making contributions to the foundation. Seoul's foreign ministry said the solution is aimed at improving relations between the two countries that have worsened since 2019, when the Japanese government imposed export restrictions.
We hope this solution serves to overcome the tensions between South Korea and Japan and pave the way for a new era. I think this is the last chance to do this.
He also stressed that forcing a new apology is not the key to resolving this issue, and that it's more important for the Japanese government to consistently and faithfully follow up on the apology it officially made in the past, referring to the joint declaration between the two countries' former leaders, Kim Dae-jung and Keizo Obuchi. President Yoon also said this was a decision to move toward a future-oriented relationship with Japan, and that this will open a new era of bilateral relations with Tokyo. In response, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida welcomed South Korea's plan and said he hopes to improve ties by closely working with President Yoon Suk-yeol. Tokyo's foreign minister also said he hopes the solution will help restore ties between the countries, and said the Japanese government will continue to uphold the apologies it made in the past.
On this occasion, we confirm that the Japanese government continues to uphold the stance on historical recognition made by previous cabinets as a whole, including the joint declaration between Japan and South Korea made in October 1998.
In a statement, U.S. President Joe Biden also said this marks a groundbreaking new chapter of cooperation between two of Washington's closest allies, and that he looks forward to strengthening the trilateral ties. Paeun-ji, Arirang News.
On top of taming the forced labor feud, more actions on the way between the two countries to restore much worn-out economic ties. First off, ending strict export controls that Japan slapped on South Korea in 2019. Our Shin Ha-young reports.
A silver lining for the South Korea-Japan trade relationship. South Korea and Japan decided to launch official talks on lifting of Japan's curbs on exports to Korea, which have been in place since 2019. According to a briefing from Seoul's Trade Ministry on Monday, South Korea announced temporary halt to its World Trade Organization litigation regarding the restrictions, which was compiled in 2019.
The two nations agreed to swiftly conduct bilateral consultations on issues about export regulations to bring the situation back to July 2019. South Korea's government decided to stop the WTO litigation during the talks. Japanese government will hold a policy meeting with Seoul on exports soon.
He added that the announcement was made by Japan's trade ministry simultaneously. Back in July 2019, after South Korea's ruling for the Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor, Japan placed restrictions on its export to South Korea. The export items included 3 major industrial materials that are necessary for South Korea's production of chips and displays. A month later, Tokyo also removed Seoul from its whitelist of preferred trading partners, triggering a strong backlash. In response, South Korea filed a complaint with the WTO over the trade dispute, claiming it was a discriminatory act that goes against WTO rules. Meanwhile, South Korea's trade ministry said that despite Japan's exports curbs, there was no delay in South Korea's production due to the government's fast response. However, the official added that reliance on Japan regarding imports of materials, parts, and equipment has plunged. The government is expecting to reduce such uncertainties among domestic firms by resolving trade curbs from Japan. The exact date of bilateral talks has not been decided yet, but Seoul's trade ministry said it will be taking place soon. 신하영, Arirang News.
Now, it's not just victims who urged Japan to reflect on its history. Beijing has also called on Tokyo to repent for its past wrongdoings in response to Seoul's announcement of a solution to the forced labor issue. Speaking on Monday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning called Japan's historical forced recruitment and enslavement of laborers from Asian countries like Korea and China a grave crime against humanitarian law. She said Beijing has called on the Japanese government to properly resolve the relevant issues with an honest and responsible attitude. The Chinese official added that that would be the only way that Japan can earn the trust of its Asian neighbors and the rest of the world. South Korea took a bold step toward softening bilateral ties with Japan by having local companies contribute to a fund to pay the Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. Let's delve deeper into the plan. This morning, we're joined by Ms. Kim Mi-kyung. She's a lecturer at Pugyong National University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let's jump right into the real question. How successful will the South Korean government plan to pay victims through a foundation be? I mean, opposition from the victim side is stronger than usual, if not than ever, right?
Yeah, it is right. It is true that there exists quite strong societal disapproval of Seoul government's plan. Yet, when and if the victims wish to be compensated through the foundation, it needs to be respected. On the donor side, POSCO, for example, already has pledged 4 billion Korean won to the soon-to-be established foundation. But they would need to be very mindful of negative signals their donations would send out to the market. When the profits made by the companies can be allocated at the whims of ruling political elites, it can compromise the interests of the primary stakeholders, such as the employees, shareholders, and the consumers. In the end, it is not very prudent.
Right, and also
for the efficient workings of the Korean economy.
Mm-hmm. And also, considering it's been 4 years since the dispute between the two countries broke out, the announcement yesterday is seen as quite an unprecedented move, right? Now, what's the significance of the decision and what does it signal?
It seems to show that the Yoon administration is very desperate to mend fences with Japan at any cost. It shows its desperation or determination, whatever you call it. But their thinking seems to be quite preoccupied with getting anything done to improve Korea-Japan relations. Basically, it has made a trade-off between Korea's moral authority and short-term diplomatic gains.
Then do you think the decision came at a timely manner? Do you think this is the right time? What do you think?
Oh, I think they have been pushing it too fast without thinking through, thinking about the implications. So I'm wondering why they are pushing it so fast and so hard.
Right. And it could be also trying to, as a part, it could come as an effort to push for a summit, a possible summit between the two leaders of Kishida and Yoon later this week, as early as late next week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
but, in order to have a summit, does Korea need to kowtow to Japan as a sovereign state? We need to think about the fundamentals of diplomacy, where mutual respect is a must.
That's right. And South Korea also announced that it will resume export talks with Japan on top of solving the forced labor dispute. Does it have to do with the compensation for Korean victims of forced labor? Can we say this is a good sign for softer Seoul-Tokyo ties?
Yeah, it is interesting because the trade frictions, such as mutual export bans and Seoul's filing of complaints with WTO, were justified and framed as security concerns. Now, Seoul's drastic gesture to resolve the past wrongs committed by Japan, both countries are moving towards the financial realms. So, we can suspect that Japan tried to weaponize its economic advantage over Korea to penalize Korea's lingering grievances over history issues. Now, Korea is throwing the towel in to Japan's victory. How about that? I find it very puzzling, and I am concerned that it's going to have lingering ramifications.
Right. It looks like lots of sacrifices are being taken just to move forward. Right.
I think so. Sacrifices basically held and borne by the victims themselves, which is tragic. And at the end of the day, that's not right.
Right. Right. We'll see how the situation will unfold with the economic talks just kicking off just now. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning all the way from Busan.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
North Korea has warned of taking, quote, overwhelming actions against the latest joint military drills by South Korea and the U.S. Our Lee Dae-hyun has more.
North Korea says it's closely monitoring the military activities of South Korea and the U.S. The Korean Central News Agency on Tuesday reported that the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's younger sister Kim Yo-jong said that Pyongyang is ready to take action depending on the two allies' military activities. Kim Yo-jong also warned that a military response to Pyongyang's strategic weapon tests, such as the interception of a missile, would be considered a declaration of war. She also said that North Korea's missile tests do not take place in areas under U.S. jurisdiction, nor do they harm the security of neighboring countries. This comes after the American nuclear-capable heavy bomber B-52H flew over the west coast of the Korean peninsula as it took part in a joint drill with the South Korean Air Force. According to the South Korean Defense Ministry on Monday, the American bomber and the F-15K and KF-16 jets flew in formation for the joint exercise. This is the first time in 3 months that the U.S. has deployed the B-52H strategic bomber to the Korean peninsula. The objective was to showcase the robust relationship and higher caliber of the military forces of both countries, especially as North Korea continues to ratchet up its nuclear and missile threats. This air drill also comes a week ahead of the Freedom Shield, a South Korea-U.S. joint military exercise that's to be held on the largest scale in years. Following the joint drill, North Korea on Tuesday urged that international society should call for the two countries to stop their military exercises. North Korea's foreign ministry also criticized the deployment of B-52H in the joint drill, warning that this is a military provocation that may heighten the possibility of a nuclear war in the Korean peninsula. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's announcement regarding compensation of Japan's forced labor victims comes amid rising speculation over a state summit between the two countries in mid-March. According to Kyodo News on Monday, Seoul and Tokyo are planning a visit by President Yoon to Japan for talks with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, possibly on March 16 and 17. South Korea's Yonhap news agency in the meantime says President Yoon may travel to Japan again in May for a G7 meeting, where he could sit down with a U.S. counterpart Joe Biden as well as Kishida, as part of efforts to boost trilateral cooperation against North Korea and China. Seoul's presidential office has not officially confirmed the reports. The three leaders held a trilateral summit last June during a NATO summit in Spain, marking the first such meeting in 5 years. That was followed by a second trilateral in Cambodia in November. A plan to reform the current 52-hour workweek system has been proposed here in the country so that people can work more during busier times and go on longer vacations, a move thought to be more suitable for a better work-life balance. Our Lee Soo-jin with more.
The South Korean government is aiming to enhance the quality of life for workers and help businesses grow by making changes to the current working hours system. Finance Minister Chu Kyo-ho led an emergency meeting on Monday to address the revisions.
We will focus on making related laws and systems more flexible so that employees can concentrate better when they are working and can rest and use their vacation days more freely, as long as there's an agreement between the employee and the management.
The government is making changes to the overtime work system, which many have criticized due to labor shortages suffered by smaller firms. Under the current rules, the maximum number of working hours is 52 hours per week, including 40 regular hours and a maximum of 12 in overtime. However, under the proposal, the overtime hour limit is to be calculated on a monthly, quarterly, half-yearly, or yearly basis, allowing companies to increase maximum weekly work hours up to 69 with a guaranteed rest period of 11 hours. Total overtime hours allowed on a monthly basis now comes to 52 hours, 140 hours quarterly, 250 hours on a half-yearly basis, and 440 hours annually. The nation's selective working hour system could also see changes. Currently, employees at companies where the system is in place can decide their start and finish times along with the number of hours they work each day, as long as they do not exceed the 52 hours per week limit for a period of 1 month. The government wants to extend that period from 1 month to 3 months to allow more flexibility. And the plans include further efforts to ensure that workers get enough rest time, with workers able to exchange overtime hours worked for paid leave.
The government intends to create a new working hour standard that guarantees choice, health, and rest in order to meet global standards.
The revisions will be submitted to the National Assembly for approval between June and July. However, it may not be easy for the reforms to go through, as the ruling People Power Party faces opposition from the Democratic Party, which currently holds the majority. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Dami.
Let's start in Pakistan, where several police officers have been killed in a suicide bombing attack.
Well, that is right. At least 10 police officers were killed and several injured in a suicide bombing attack in Pakistan's Balochistan province. Now, the attack took place on Monday local time when a suicide bomber drove a motorcycle into a police truck, which was returning from policing a cultural festival. Now, the Islamic State has claimed responsibility. The attack is the second in 24 hours to hit security forces in the province. It follows a bombing of a vehicle on Sunday, which killed one security official and wounded 8 others. That attack was claimed by the separatist Baluchistan Liberation Front. The 2 bombings mark the latest in a series of attacks against Pakistan's security personnel. In late January, over 80 officers were killed in a suicide bombing that targeted police officers at a mosque in Peshawar. Shifting our attention to Belarus, where exiled opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya has been sentenced to 15 years in prison. Now, the sentence is on charges of high treason and conspiracy to seize power. This was handed down on Monday in absentia. Tikhanovskaya fled Belarus in 2020 after running in the presidential elections against sitting authoritarian leader Alexander Lukashenko. Now, it's widely thought that she won the election, but that the results were changed in Lukashenko's favor. Following the sentencing, Tikhanovskaya rejected the legitimacy of the court. It comes days after Belarus sentenced Nobel Peace Prize winner and human rights activist Ales Bialiatski to 10 years in prison on charges of financing protests and smuggling money. Meanwhile, in Paris, an exhibition is set to open to showcase the restoration work of the iconic Notre Dame Cathedral. Located beneath the square of the cathedral at the heart of the construction site, the exhibition opens on Tuesday local time. It will run until the 12th century cathedral is finally reopened to the public. And according to French officials on Monday, that could come as early as December 2024. This is on the back of fast restoration work that started last year after 2 years of stabilizing the building. Notre Dame was badly damaged in a fire in April 2019, which saw its famous 93-meter spire collapse. And finally, in a bid to promote recycling, young members of the Scout Association in Mexico gathered from around the country to create a 90-meter lily flower using tin cans. Taking place in Mexico City's Zocalo, or Town Square, on Sunday local time, the Scouts made the arrangement and then raced to crush the cans for them to be recycled later. According to the head of the Scouts Mexican branch, proceeds from the event will go to help those affected by the Turkey, Syria earthquakes and to local orphanages. The event was also held to mark the group's 96-year anniversary.
Good morning. It's going to feel more like mid to late April. Morning temperatures are about 4 degrees higher than the same time yesterday, and highs will top out at 18 degrees Celsius this afternoon in the capital, going about 9 degrees higher than seasonal norms. Well, the early glimpse of mid-spring weather is definitely enjoyable, but not so much the dusty and dry air. Dryness in the air is showing no sign of easing up. In fact, 70% of this year's wildfires broke out in just 1 month, with nationwide accumulated precipitation at less than 15 millimeters. We have some rain in the forecast on Wednesday, but it won't be enough to relieve the dryness in the air. And also, stagnant airflow and dust from overseas will create dustier conditions today. Then many southern parts of the country will see highs jumping to above 20 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Gwangju going up to 22 degrees, Gyeongju topping out at 23 degrees under sunny skies nationwide. But do not put away your winter jackets just yet. Abnormally warm temperatures will come to an end next week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Do stay with us for more updates throughout the day. Thanks for watching.